Hey everyone, and welcome to this video lecture, Assets and Lighting. In this tutorial, I'll show you how to add lights to your scene, apply materials to your BSP, and place static meshes to help flesh out the level. We'll also be learning a bit about the content browser as we go along. So the first thing we're going to be diving into here is applying materials to BSP. So here's our level that we've worked on in the past lectures. Now the first thing I want to do is apply a material to our floor, but I want to point out a difference here. Now we started with the basic template that UDK provides, and I want to point out here, if you click on one of our houses, which has this checkerboard pattern to it, down here at the bottom it says current level, persistent level, and that's it. This spot right here is blank. If you click on our floor, it has a field here, and it's persistent level static mesh actor. That means our floor is actually a model, a 3D model, as opposed to BSP, which makes sense. And if we look in any of the other viewports, you can see the geometry and the tri-count of our floor, where our BSP is just a solid brush. Because static meshes and BSP have differences in how to apply materials, we're going to just quickly remake our floor to match our buildings. To do that, we're going to take one of our walls here. So I'm going to go in the top view. I'm going to select this, and then I'm going to go to an ununiform scaling and just kind of scale it out a little bit. Until it looks about the right size. And then I'm going to line it up. And then go into our edit geometry mode like I explained last time and grab these vertices here and these ones here. And then I'm going to set the orientation to world and drag it so that it finishes up our square area. Now I can delete our floor piece, so I'll click this, get rid of that, and zoom in to our newly made floor. Should be right here. And let's go ahead and line this up a little better. Okay. Now if we go back in here and we rebuild our geometry, you can see we have this awful, ugly, striped thing for our floor. And you can see it's not exactly lined up with our walls like we'd like. So I'm going to go back in here and sync this a little bit more. I'll do that. And that'll give us a lip here so we don't just fall off the edge by accident. Okay. So now that we have a new floor piece built in, we can see that it has a really ununiform, the checkers don't look great at all. And that's because we did the non-uniform scaling tool, like I explained earlier, and that might screw some things up. I'll get back to this in a second, as we're going to fix it using the surface properties, but to start I'd like to just apply a material to our little houses here. So we're going to bring up our content browser, and I've already check some things here, so let's do this. Okay, this is what it should look like when you first enter. I have it maximized here, and then what we want to do is we want to find just materials. Now, before we dive in any further, I want to explain what a material is. In games, the pictures that you see applied to objects are called textures, and that's basically an image created by an artist, and it's put on static mesh, or in this case BSP. A material is a texture, but a texture with a shader or an effect applied to it. And we'll be applying only materials and not textures to our BSP. So let's go ahead and click materials here, and then using the tags window, which on the it separates these into different categories, we can see the number of materials in each of these tags. So let's scroll down a little bit here, and we'll select building, which has 37 materials to choose from. We're going to be applying a material to our house, so it doesn't matter which one you want to pick. I'm just going to pick this one that says bunker all stripe, and when you select it, you can see that it has this yellow border on it. That means it's ready to be applied. So we're going to minimize our content browser, go back into our scene, and now that we're in camera mode, we want to do select mode, and we're going to click on one of the faces of our houses. Once we have that, we're going to right click for the context menu and click apply material. Now if we look, we can see that we have a material applied to it. So let's go ahead and test our levels to see what it looks like in game. there it is. So now getting back to our floor piece here, which has this stretched out pattern, we can also note that all the BSP areas we have are of different checker sizes and shapes. Now the checker sizes are going to dictate how your material is applied to that particular piece of BSP. And so traditionally what you want is nice square patterns like this on our insides here. Now the differences mean that the same material applied to this inside area is going to look smaller than applied to this. So when we're dealing with textures, we want to make sure that it's called the UV area, are all the same. To do that, we can right click an area. So let's right click our floor and go to Surface Properties, or you can hit F5. Surface Properties is a window that gives us tools to work with how the UV maps are applied to our BSP. So the first thing we want to do is correct our stretching. So with this selected, we're going to go to Alignment right here, choose Planar, and hit Apply. And now you can see that it's reapplied our UVs in a nice checkerboard shape. However, you can see that both our floor and our wall and our outer walls here are all different kinds of sizes. So in order to really get an idea of how we want to manipulate our surface area, it's better to apply a material first and get a look at it. So let's close our surface properties, open our content browser back up, and choose a floor material. I'm going to choose this BSP organic tile brick right here. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to apply the material, and then we're going to play and see how it looks. Now for our character height, this material looks pretty okay. They're pretty big tiles, but it doesn't look unnatural in any way. The same could be said for a wall. Because it's just a dry plastered look, we don't really see any noticeable distortion in the scaling. However, if we were to have two different scales of the same material, we would be able to notice it. So we want to keep our walls all consistent, and even though it's bigger scaling than our floor, it doesn't look bad, and so we can continue with it. So next I'm going to show you an alternate way of applying materials, just based on user preference. So if we were to open our content browser again, and let's say we wanted to apply a new material to the other side of this house, so let's choose one here. Let's do this Necros walls. You can actually just drag it from your content browser onto the face, and it should apply, like so. So depending on which way, if you like to use the right-click context or the drag, it's up to you. So the next thing I want to cover is how to quickly duplicate materials, because we have a lot of faces to cover. So to do that, let's go ahead and minimize our content browser. We're going to Alt right-click our plaster side here to copy, and then Alt left-click to paste the material. So using this route, we can quickly just drop the same texture on all the sides of our building. And let's do the same for these ones. Okay. Next, let's choose an interior material. And we'll probably want a separate one for the floor and the walls. So let's open our content browser back up. And I'm going to choose this one for the floor. Okay. And then for the walls, I'm going to choose, oh, we can see that they're separate here, so let's Alt right click, Alt left click. Okay. And for the walls, let's choose this one. Okay, now let's go ahead and test and see what it looks like in-game. You can see I forgot to add a texture to the top here. So we'll go ahead and add this real quick. We can go into a different lit mode, which will show us no lighting in terms of how the game lighting is applied. And that'll give us a better idea of what's textured and what's not. So I'm going to do the same one here. Okay, we should have almost everything textured here. Let's go back into lit mode. So the last thing we have to texture here is our outside scaling, or outside walls. So let's go ahead and click these, and we're going to choose a new material to differentiate it from the rest. Let's choose this one right here. There's some concrete. And this one doesn't, it's a little stretched out. It won't look too bad, but let's go ahead and fix it anyways. So we're going to go to surface properties and just hit planar. And we want to do this so both sides. And then let's apply our material. Okay, that looks good. Same thing for these. Okay, so now we have everything textured. Let's. I'm going to show you how to change the way it is applied. In other words, you can move and rotate the material on the face by using pan and rotation here in our surface properties. So let's say we had some checkers that we needed to line up exactly, or we didn't like the way these lined up. So we can actually click this and go in the U and V directions. You can see that U moves it to the right and left, and if you, it says here, if you hold shift while clicking, it goes the opposite direction. So instead of going right, that'll go left. V is up and down, so we can go down or up, and we can also rotate. So we want to go to 45-degree rotation. So those will help you with some of the textures, especially like the Necros walls that have very ornate details on them. You'll run into areas which you'll need to adjust them slightly to make them look good, and that's how you do it with the pan and rotation tools. Now that we have some materials on our buildings, we can go to the second part of this video lecture series, and that's going to be placing static meshes. So static meshes is a fancy name for basically any object or 3D model that we're going to put in our level that is made of geometry and that's not BSP. Now, static meshes are used for a variety of things. Decoration, actual structure of the level, and in most cases, a UDK level is going to be made up about 90% or maybe 80%, depending on the level of static meshes, and then only about 10 or 20% BSP. So we have a really basic structure of a map out of BSP here, and the next step is going to be adding static meshes to liven it up. So in your content browser, we want to go back, here I'm going to maximize it, we're going to go back to the object type here, and we want, instead of materials, we want static meshes. So go ahead and click that, and then the same thing, there's tags here, so we're going to go into architectural building. And that narrows it down to all these different things we can add to our levels. So let's see, I'm going to go ahead and just choose a pillar. So let's choose this pillar right here. And it's the same thing. When you click on it, it highlights just like a material. And so that means we can minimize this, go into our scene, and click Add Actor, Load Static Mesh Next Pillars. And then we can go add static mesh pillars right here. And you can see here we have our little pillar. Now alternatively, just like materials, you can also drag and drop. So let's choose another one here. I'm going to choose this pipe set. We can just drag it into our level. Now, just like BSP, you can use your tools up here, your translation tools, to move and rotate things around. And in this case, we want to scale this. These pipes are tiny, so let's go ahead and scale them up so we can see it. And if you hit home, it'll center your view to it. So we have some pipes and a pillar here. Let's make this bigger. Now, the basic idea is you can add static meshes and then decorate your levels. So I was going to do this and apply these to the corners of my buildings to break up the hard corner. And we can go ahead and make this a little bit bigger. Like so. And then the same rules apply if I wanted to duplicate this right away. I would just hold Alt and then drag and create another one like that. Now, unlike BSP, static meshes do not need to be built in order to be viewed and manipulated correctly. So once we've placed them in the scene, they are there. Moving along, the next thing I want to show you is how to add lights to your scene. Because after static meshes and materials, lights will help your scene look better than it is right now. So we have one light in our area here, and that is a directional light. We can find that. Let's close our content browser. If you take your top-down menu, you can see here is a light bulb. And if you hit home, you can zoom in on it. So this is D/S is a directional light, and if you hit F4, it can bring up the properties menu for it. Now, the directional light is creating the light that is currently applied to your level, but it's the only light source. So we're going to add a couple of lights inside of our little houses, and then some static mesh actors to make it look like they're light bulbs instead of just a light popping out of nowhere. To place a light, we have two options. The first is to right-click any area and go to Add Actor and Light. This adds a point light, so let's go ahead and add one to show you. And we can see here that if we sink it below the floor, the lighting disappears, and then you bring it up, you can see it. Again, hitting F4 will give you the options. Now generally the things you want to change here are the brightness level, the color, and the radius. So we're going to move one of these point lights into our little houses here. So let's just go ahead and do this. And we can see in the top-down view how close we are to middle here. So let's do something like this. Okay, so now we have a light source, and we can see if it's working by doing this, and it's definitely working. So let's go ahead and change the color to something a little more vibrant so that we can see it. And let's change it to a blue color. That'll be a contrast to our afternoon glow. Hit OK, and then close this. Now we need a static mesh light to make it look like there's a light source here. So let's bring our content browser back up. And let's go to Deco. Uncheck building. And here we're given some options. We've got a concave light here. Let's choose that. Let's go ahead and drag it into your scene. And we're going to place it on the floor. And this is where top-down view is really handy. You can line it up right underneath your light. Now, what we want to do is build our lighting. So just like geometry, the lighting in here only gives you a preview of how it really will look. So let's go ahead and hit Build Lighting and hit OK. And when it's done, let's go ahead and hit Close, and we can see our newly built map. So you can see that we have some nice shadows being applied from our, our floating pillars here. And then inside here, we can see our glow. Now it's kind of lost and it has some interference here, so why don't we make our light stronger. So let's go to hit F4, and we're going to crank the brightness up. And we're going to drop the radius to make it a little more noticeable, like so. And I'm going to rebuild and see how it looks. There, that looks a little better, a little bit more noticeable. So that's a quick primer on how to add materials, static meshes, and lights to your level. Another way of adding a light is to go into your content browser. So let's go ahead and maximize this again. And up here at the top we want to go to, instead of the content browser, we're going to go to actor classes. This gives us this drop down area. And from here we want to hit lights. And then it gives us 4 options. Directional lights, you traditionally only want to have 1 in your scene. And point lights are going to be your major source of light in most cases. You're going to have tons of point lights. So let's go ahead and get a point light, and we have here different ones we can do. In most cases you're going to just use your normal point light, but these other ones are available for different things, such as if you're doing scripting with Kismet and you want a movable point light, you would use this one, and so on and so forth. So this is another way of adding them. So we could just go here, and then minimize this, and so we'll just right click here and say add point light here. And again, if you had chosen another one such as add point light movable, it would change to reflect that in this spot right here. Now since we're building a small level, it won't really matter how many different static meshes you use. But when you make a bigger level, optimization is a very important thing because meshes are heavy. They have a lot of verts and tripod points that are going to be calculated in the game. So to maximize optimization, when you're building a level or an idea, try and reuse the same static mesh as many times as you can for different purposes, as opposed to using different static meshes all across your level, because it will help the level load faster. It's just something to keep in mind as you're building your level. And that concludes this video lecture, Assets and Lighting. The next one will be cooking your level and preparing it to be played.